Hello, everyone. We're going to wait a little bit until folks who are logging on, they have a chance to get connected, and we'll start in a minute or so. All right. Well, maybe we can get started, and I suppose that Drew will be handling that lobby as more people come in. But anyway, well, good afternoon, everyone. It is really a pleasure to welcome everybody to this kickoff of the Sustainable Development Goals Action and Awareness Week. And I am particularly, I'm going to enjoy the fact that I'm going to be interviewing and not being interviewed. So I'm going to enjoy every bit of it. Also because the folks I'm going to be interviewing and really and moderating in this discussion are really terrific leaders who play different, important, and very complementary roles in the life of Georgia Tech, and all of them experience the Sustainable Development Goals in their own different ways and incorporate them into their work or into their studies in different ways. So it's going to be just great to see those different angles. Now, I realize that many people on this call are very familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, and I realize that many of you have been working on either one of them or many of them, or even the whole framework in your own lives. But just in case we have some colleagues who are, or some students who are sort of new or new-ish to the SDGs, maybe to provide a little bit of framework, a reminder that the Sustainable Development Goals are really the current development agenda, global agenda of the United Nations, and that they were approved by all the member states of the United Nations in 2015. Based on what had been a reasonably successful prior experience with the Millennium Development Goals. And the Millennium Development Goals were successful in attracting the attention of different actors, not just governments, but businesses and academic leaders and civic society. And so this is a much more comprehensive list of goals. As you know, the Sustainable Development Goals are organized around 17 goals, and differently from the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals are not only relevant to developing economies. What's very important about these 17 goals is that they're relevant in every single context. They highlight the reality that many of the issues that we face as a species on this planet really tie us all together. So these goals are global in nature. Some people call them the global goals as a shorthand. But the fact that they're global in the sense that they affect all of us and it affects all of our planet doesn't mean that they're just for the UN to take care of. These goals manifest themselves in very specific ways in each of our communities, and right here in our very campus, in our city, in our state, and as we will hear from the panels. You will also, of course, some of you were here at the time when we started, when we developed our own strategic plan at Georgia Tech a couple of years ago, and during that process, we concluded that the Georgia Tech, really our role, the reason why we exist, is to develop technologies that can improve the human condition, in which, of course, it raises the very immediate question of, okay, what are the aspects of the human condition that we need to to take care of. And rather than have our own independent answer to that question, we thought that it might make sense to use the Sustainable Development Goals as a very good starting point to do that. It's not a perfect framework. In fact, there's been a ton of debate about whether it's too many goals or too few, and things that may be left out or not addressed strong enough. But it is the best we got. This is the framework. Some people describe it as a sort of a strategic plan for the world. These are the goals that we all ought to share and push forward. And it becomes a very interesting framework for us as an institution, as one of the leading research universities in the country, to test our commitment. If we want to make a difference, these are the things that matter. Of course, when you look at the 17 goals, immediately you can see incredible things that are happening on our campus every day that address many of them. Looking about goal number 6, clean water and sanitation. We just installed on the 2nd floor of the Candida building a prototype of this new toilet designed by our colleague Shannon Yee in partnership with Bill Gates, which is going to provide a sanitation solution to millions of people, potentially in cities and slums around the world where there is nothing like it available, and where millions of children are exposed to terrible infectious diseases because of that. So that's a solution that is happening right here on our campus. Or, of course, there is the sustainable cities and communities. Some of you were shared the moment this afternoon, or was it this? Yeah, it was this afternoon or this morning, when we announced this incredibly interesting project in partnership with MARTA in our city, in Atlanta, to bring about new solutions to expand access to public transit, much more sustainable way of transportation, and bring that into areas and neighborhoods where people have been isolated. And this is not just sustainability, but it's also social equity, is allowing people to have access to a better job, to school, to healthcare, to entertainment. So it's and that's just directly ties into goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. And we can go through each of these goals and realize how much we're doing and how much we can do. So that's, I don't know if that helps as a sort of a framework of why at Georgia Tech we think that the SDGs are a very important framework, and why we're hoping that this week we can bring awareness to it. And with that, let me introduce the panelists, and I'll start asking questions. But with us today we have Juan Artilla. Juan is Director of Facilities and Capital Planning for the College of Sciences, but he serves on various groups, including the chair of the Campus Physical Environment Committee with the Staff Council. He's also the advisor. He's chair of the OLA, Employee Resources Group for Hispanics and Latinos and allies. And he, from the standpoint of the project focus, he has a role that influences the campus at large. Jennifer Hirsch, who is the director of Georgia Tech Center for the Serve, Learn, Sustain, and she's also an associate professor in city and regional planning. And of course, the Serve, Learn, Sustain has been just an absolutely terrific program that has enriched the lives of many of our students through a whole range of service learning opportunities. And also extending the partnerships that Georgia Tech is engaging with other entities in our city. We'll hear a lot more in a minute. Julia Kubanek is Georgia Tech's Vice President for Interdisciplinary Research and a Professor of Biological Sciences. And so in her portfolio is the idea of how do you bring different faculty members from different disciplines whose areas of expertise are absolutely instrumental in finding new solutions to some of these complex problems that we're dealing with. And Reid Walker is a third-year international affairs student. He's president of the Engineering Without Borders chapter here at Georgia Tech, and he has engaged. I got to talk to him previously, and it's just fascinating how many different initiatives either he's leading or participating in, and his experience, I think, could shed light into what's available for students and why it matters. In fact, that's where I would like to start, if that's okay. I would like to start by asking Reid to tell us a little bit about your experiences that you've had at Georgia Tech, in whether it's Engineering Without Borders or any of the other organizations, and share with us which of these have maybe been the most influential for you in your time at Georgia Tech.
Well, thank you, Dr. Cabrera, for that introduction. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with these distinguished panelists. I'd like to start actually going back to the 2020 panel. Something that really stretched my mind was John MacArthur's idea of putting the SDGs, he's from the Brookings Institution, putting the SDGs into 17 rooms where there's a discussion between cross-disciplinary institutions about how we can best address these SDGs. And so when I came to Georgia Tech's campus, I had ideas of environmental advocacy and interest in environmental protection, but I didn't really know a place to start. And so those interests were accentuated by and turned into a passion with some of the experiences that I'd love to talk about and share with you today. To start, as a summer freshman in 2019, I participated in SLS based classes. So for those that aren't familiar with SLS, Serve, Learn, Sustain, it's a place where you can learn about sustainability and academic enrichment on campus, but also participate in local initiatives in Atlanta and abroad. And so I got a chance to take a class called Urban Sociology with Dr. Alan Hyde, which focuses on gentrification and sustainable communities, SDG 11, in an area called Grove Park, which is a Southwest-based community considered lower income. And so I got a chance to interview, through a semi-structured interview, certain individuals that were able to understand some of the certain SDGs that they may be missing, whether it's hunger in terms of a food desert, lack of pharmacies, and whatnot. And so taking these classes in SDG-based initiatives, I was able to kind of further pursue and get involved on campus. And so my background, as Dr. Cabrera was saying, is in civil service organizations. So after I experienced and got involved with some of the SLS-based classes, I joined SGA, and I got involved with some of the sustainable committee initiatives that were through SGA. And then I finally transferred to my role as with Engineering Without Borders. And so what I found with Engineering Without Borders is that it's this intersection between government, corporations, and non-governmental organizations. And it's this intersection to address sanitation and affordable and clean energy. And so what is so great about Georgia Tech is that you can really experience at these different rooms of sustainability and the SDGs, because with 17 goals and 169 targets, it's so hard to fathom addressing that all at once as a student. But with Georgia Tech, you're able to experience and understand and find out where your strengths best lie in relation to these SDGs. So I got a chance to join the Nicaragua Clean Cookstoves project. And so with this project, we were able to help a community in Nuevo Monaster with a public health air hazard. And so we built these, we worked with a local stove manufacturer. And that's one thing about understanding the SDGs and community-based work with sustainable communities. It's not, and I'm sure the other panelists will get into this, it's not about creating solutions for individuals, different communities, different cultures, but it's creating a solution for them and have the stakeholders in the driver's seat to be able to really promote change. And so I really found that as a leader to be able to understand how these cultures, these societies, these different government organizations work. And as a social science student myself, as an international affairs major, I was always wondering, how best do I fit into the equation going to an engineering-based school? And so with this Nicaragua-based project, we were able to help individuals, 100 families in Nuevo Monaster with a Prolinia Nicaraguan-based stove to eliminate particulate matter and carbon emissions. And so that's just one project in the Engineering Without Borders framework. We have a project in Malawi. We've had projects in Uganda and Cameroon. We currently have sanitation-based projects in based on often in Venture Prize, which Whisperwash, which does a ton of work in bioreactors and design think tanks. We also have a Still Meadow project as well. And so based out of Baltimore that focuses on more civil and infrastructure. So it's these community-based projects that I really found as a focalized point to understand how best to attack these problems. And it's not, you know, like I said, coming together and trying to innovate for these individuals. It's really about taking what I've learned from tech and finding commonalities and what we can work on.
Hey, Reid, in your experience, especially with Engineering Without Borders, because clearly, I mean, you're majoring in international affairs, so I imagine you already came in with a great interest in these issues. But in Engineering Without Borders, you must have worked with many colleagues who are majoring in engineering. What do you think was their experience in these projects? Do you think it was as impactful as it was for you?
Definitely, and what we say with Engineering Without Borders is that we accept every major. And so the technical work, and what I've found is with engineering and the engineering students, there's definitely an enrichment for engineers to understand, to address these paramount issues. They have to understand the societal and cultural background behind these projects. And that's why I think that's really the focal point of sustainable engineering, is to not only understand that technical side, because in a lot of these projects, we've had, you know, projects that don't meet the goals that we set out for in our evaluation and learning plan that's set forth under the EWB USA hierarchy. It's more the community-based side. So if you're interested, and we'd love to have you apply, it's really about understanding that community base, and that's where those connections are really made when you're able to interact with NGOs, able to interact with government officials and understand that context. Because with COVID, we've had to really readjust with remote implementation and having to work and establish and keep those connections in a remote setting.
Thank you so much, Reid. Well, we'll come back to you. But let me move to Julia. Julia, sometimes we joke that the world has problems and the universities have departments, and how, I guess, because of the way we're structured, and we tend to spend most of our time with people in our own domains and kind of working with using similar tools. And yet, when we deal with any of those 17 goals, it becomes very apparent that you need toolkits and approaches from different disciplines. Tell us a little bit about your critical view about the cases at Georgia Tech where you think we've done a good job of bringing people together, and maybe what are the areas where we need to do more. What's your assessment?
That's a really good question. So I think Georgia Tech is well recognized nationally and internationally as a place that is very friendly to interdisciplinary work, interdisciplinary research, and interdisciplinary education. And you're right, we notice there is not a sustainable development goal in math. There's not a sustainable development goal in electrical engineering. I mean, all the goals that are there are crossing disciplines in ways that require that we bring people together. And we have a similar model for encouraging faculty and student research at Georgia Tech to cross boundaries. And that's that we have these 10 interdisciplinary research institutes, which welcome students and faculty from all across Georgia Tech, including the academic side and also the Georgia Tech Research Institute, are all welcome to participate in these interdisciplinary research institutes. And many of the 10, in fact, I think all of the 10 have relevance to the Sustainable Development Goals. So for example, clean energy as one of the SDGs and clean water and sanitation, those are absolutely relevant goals to several of our interdisciplinary institutes that combine focus on energy, sustainability, renewable bioproducts. And then we also have an Institute for People and Technology that addresses many of the goals around sustainable cities and communities and also reducing inequality. So one of our strategies at Georgia Tech is to make sure that these structures that we create complement the academic programs. And so the faculty and the students, we are all also affiliated with a school or department and a college, and with a degree program, but we can also participate in these institutes. So social scientists can work with computer scientists, can work with earth scientists or mathematicians, can work with engineers and policy people in terms of trying to address some of these goals. Now, we don't do everything, right? We certainly, there's some areas that I would love to see us expand into, and some of these, you know, might not seem to have a direct road to the SDGs. I'd like us to be more into outer space research, right? This is not an area of research that is directly addressed by the SDGs or really our existing interdisciplinary research institute structures, but what we need to do is really look to the future and then plan the structures today that want to take us to the future, right? Rather than looking to what was necessary in the last 20 years. So it's an evolving process, but most of our faculty are engaged in these interdisciplinary research efforts, and many of our students are. And I think one goal we should have for the near term is to ensure that all the students have access to these kinds of interdisciplinary training in experiential research learning. Oh, President Cabrera, you are muted, and I got to say it.
Thank you, thank you. It's been 2 years of doing this. So no, I was thinking that I guess this is my snarky comment, that the Space Exploration Interdisciplinary Research Institute would be very relevant if we fail to deliver on the other 17 goals. So I guess that's also. So tell me, in your own career as a faculty member, as a researcher yourself, what has your experience been, both in working with people across other disciplines? Why is it hard? Why should you encourage maybe younger faculty to say this is something that would be a very cool thing to do for you?
Well, I think you said this a few minutes ago, that it's easy to stay in our lane. It's easy to stay around the people who speak the same language and have the same backgrounds as ourselves, but that doesn't stretch us. And so I was trained myself as a chemist, and now I'm practicing biology and also chemistry, but I've been part of a research project for over 10 years that was funded by the National Institutes of Health to go create economic development solutions in the South Pacific related around natural resources and drug discovery. And so I got to work with members of the School of International Affairs. I got to work with colleagues from different universities, including the University of the South Pacific in Fiji, where really the goals there are to think about some of the ways that these research benefits can be brought to developing nations as well. So this makes me think about, you know, you mentioned the project about the reinvented toilet at Georgia Tech. I mean, the goal of that project is really to enable sanitation, which is one of the 17 SDGs, to be accessible to people who don't have sewage treatment and don't have access necessarily to a lot of quantities of water and need to be able to produce clean water from the waste that human societies have. I also think about our smart sea level sensors project down at the Savannah coast. You know, the Georgia coast experiences enormously large tide fluctuations, even by Atlantic coastal standards, and they are not very predictable based on the modeling tools we have. And so that's because of weather and because of other patterns, but those internet-enabled smart sensors that are deployed on the Georgia coast by community groups and collaborations with Georgia Tech have enabled better predictions of flooding events that will help make mitigation plans for the future for that area, which is important locally to us as being part of the state of Georgia. Yeah,
no, thank you for that. In fact, I've always been very intrigued by the sea level sensor program, especially also because how it involves even high school students, right? So we're conducting research and at the same time getting kids early on involved and understand the role of science. So it has many different and very interesting dimensions. Thank you so much, Julia. Let me move to Jenny. Jenny, you obviously you were very involved when we crafted the strategic plan and that mission statement. We developed leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. And I think we can argue that we are much better at advancing technology, right? That's what we've always done. But it also, that mission statement begs the question of how do we develop leaders, people who not only know how to analyze the circuit or solve a differential equation or analyze the structure, but actually who can drive change. And I've been very, very intrigued by how SLS really helps achieve that goal. Help us understand what SLS does and why it matters so much for our mission.
Sure, thanks President Cabrera for having me as part of this. And Reid, it was exciting to hear that you got involved in SLS right from the beginning. Alan Hyde is one of our most loved faculty partners, and you got exposed to him right from the get-go. So SLS works with faculty from across all of the different colleges at all levels, from incoming students to capstone projects, and on curriculum and research partnerships to figure out how to really push the needle on collaborations with community partners that are going to help us advance towards sustainability and advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And from the beginning, actually, when I was hired 7 years ago, I was pretty sure that they made a mistake when they called me and really meant to call an engineer. I'm a applied cultural anthropologist, but it turns out that there are a lot of engineers already at Georgia Tech. And there actually, I think, are about 6 anthropologists. We have found each other, but there is not an anthropology department, and none of us has the title of anthropologists. So we're all kind of in hiding. But what we're doing behind the scenes, and one of the key roles in Serve, Learn, Sustain has really been to figure out, very similar to what you were talking about, Reid, what does the social side of sustainability look like? And what does it look like to really educate engineers or people focused on technology, or work with faculty members who are focused on largely on even the technological sides of things like social science, and figure out how the social piece, whether it's humanities or social sciences or design, fits in with the engineering. Because as we've seen with climate change, and we have seen with even things like COVID, the technology itself is not enough. So first of all, the technology without understanding the social side of things can actually hurt people. We see a lot of examples of that with energy in the past. We see a lot of examples of that with pollution. We see a lot of examples of that with the ways that social systems get deployed without understanding how the people who are impacted the most by them can actually be hurt sometimes by the systems that we put in place. So really understanding social sustainability, community engagement, and equity as a key piece of the work is very, very key, and something that we have stressed from the beginning. So I'm happy to give a couple examples of the work, or to leave it at that for the moment.
I would love to hear the couple of examples.
Okay. So, well, one of them is that was really unexpected, I think, when Serve, Learn, Sustain first started, is that about 4 years ago now, we actually, with Emory and with Spelman, we started an SDG network, a Sustainable Development Goals network of our own called RCE Greater Atlanta, which is affiliated with United Nations and brings together about 10 universities in the Atlanta region, including, we really stretched the region to include UGA, which is part of it, and including business and government, City of Atlanta, Atlanta Regional Commission, to figure out how to advance the SDGs through education and training. And we've been doing that work for about 4 years now. And a lot of it is about how do we transform the ways that we educate, instead of assuming that the universities can just apply our knowledge to communities and it will be better. So to that end, one of my colleagues, Rebecca Watts-Hull, has started a really neat community science initiative that brings together a whole bunch of universities and a whole bunch of community partners to figure out what are the main goals for sustainable development in the region that community science can contribute to, and can we all figure out what those are and work towards advancing that community science on a regional level as a collaboration. I also, another colleague of mine, Ruthie Yao, is piloting a really neat class that brings together students from Emory and also Morehouse, and includes a faculty member also co-teaching from Agnes Scott. They meet once a week at Georgia Tech, and it's called Engaging Global Communities. And they are working with 3 partners in the Clarkston community, which is known as the most diverse square mile in America, to support the work of those Clarkston partners that they're doing, trying to advance the SDGs in the Clarkston area. So I guess the last thing that I'll share is that we did pilot, or we have just released a pilot of a land acknowledgement for Georgia Tech that we actually piloted during a class on asset-based community development, a short course that we taught a few weeks ago in the Candida building. I'll put it here in the chat. If people want to take a look at it, we're hoping other people will build on it to do their own land acknowledgements. And the last thing I'll close about that is, I think it's really interesting to think about land and land ownership in the SDGs. There are arguments that land ownership and supporting land stewardship by groups that have been intentionally left out of land ownership and stewardship is foundational to achieving all the SDGs. And I think it's important to think about that during this last day of Black History Month, and also to think about how is it that we work with, through SLS or other groups on campus, to support Black farmers in our area. And you'll see a lot of resources linked on this page to that. We are doing something that brings together English classes with engineering to support partners like Wonder Grubs in understanding what a closed loop system looks like in work that this wonderful Black social entrepreneur is doing around sustainable insect farming and harvesting. So that's one of my favorite projects to talk about at this point in time.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Let me bring Juan into this conversation, because we all know that the experience of all of us, particularly students, when you're on campus, it's not just what happens in the classroom, or it's not just even the amazing experiences like the ones Reid described. It's also just being here, being on our campus, right? Using our facilities, our buildings, walking through campus. Those are experiences that shape our way of thinking, right? About physical space, about land, about our relationship with the environment. And I've been just amazed since I returned. I was a grad student here in the early 90s, been amazed of how much more inspiring our campus is. I've been, as some of you know, an obsessed fan of the Candida building and the eco commons around it, and the sort of the new approach to even campus design. As someone who is deep into that work, right? Help us highlight how the campus can help that experience, and what are the coolest things that you've been either personally involved with or that you've sort of seen happen at Georgia Tech? What parts of campus should we visit and learn more about?
Well, first of all, thank you, President Cabrera, for having me on this panel. I am honored to share this virtual stage with everyone here. Yes, the facilities realm is very interesting. Like you said, walking through the spaces, walking through the grounds of campus. I'm actually an architect by trade, and my dad is an architect too. And I remember something that he told me when I was very young about why he loved being an architect. He said, you're able to walk inside something that was inside of you. And so I just think that's amazing, that concept that you're able to envision something, see something, and then you actually are physically able to experience it. And I love to hear too, like you said, about alumni coming to campus and just saying what a transformation it's been. Whether you're an alumnus from 50 years ago or 5 years ago, you see a lot of change. And I've been at Georgia Tech as an employee for 10 years, and incrementally you just see these changes. You don't realize it until you do kind of look back and say, oh, wow, Clough was just built by the time I first started. And CODA was developed during this time. All these things that now we see and are just here, it took a lot of effort and a lot of what we call embodied energy to work on these things. But We've talked about Candida quite a bit. I was actually personally involved in Candida when the building was first being conceived. It was talked about as being a place like a community center, which would include something for everyone at Georgia Tech to experience. And at some point I got a look at the floor plans and they said science labs, class labs. I said, interesting. That's my realm. I work in the College of Sciences. I work on teaching labs as well as research labs. So I kind of raised my hand and said, what labs? And they said, funny, this is Central Campus, essentially the facilities team and capital planning. They said, well, we actually are looking to see who will inhabit these labs. And Juan, can you help with that? And so obviously it wasn't just me, but we had a big group of people who kind of solicited some responses to say, well, how could, if you were to move in this building, what would you do and how could you use it? So I would just say that we took some labs that were formerly in the Clough building. We looked at every single one of their experiments and their energy usage and what they proposed to do in order to reduce that, because you couldn't just move your lab from Clough to Candida. You had to really think about your processes and how you use electricity and water. And we got Earth and Atmospheric Sciences labs, the beekeeping operation, and the ecology labs in Candida. So I would say, as far as visiting, obviously Candida has been mentioned a few times, but a lot of times you don't hear about the labs. They're just kind of there as you walk by them to go to the event spaces or the atrium, but the labs are there and they're very fascinating how they may look like your standard lab, but a lot is going on there with very little in terms of energy use. And then I would say other things to see on campus. We don't often talk about Candida and say the eco commons, but that's part and parcel. The land was designed at the same time as the building, and one wouldn't be what it is without the other. So I need to get in the habit of saying Candida and the eco commons, because it is just one really nice place to experience. As a student, again, saying the same thing, I walked through that area as a student when it was a parking lot going to the architecture building. So that's a transformational change. So if you just have a walking tour, just walk around the Pi Mile Trail. The Pi Mile Trail now has been recently rededicated, and just what you basically get a small flavor of everywhere around campus.
Yeah, I appreciate that work very, very much. And in fact, if you want to have sort of a quick introduction to the relevance of the Sustainable Development Goals, I feel like in just maybe an hour or a couple of hours of Candida plus Eco Commons, you get exposed to a whole bunch of those goals, right? Anything from new solutions to clean water and sanitation, a building that really processes its own water, that reuses, that captures rainwater, that uses water also for irrigation purposes with new compostable toilets. Of course, the affordable and clean energy. Think a campus that really produces more than twice the energy that it consumes. So there are lots of aspects that are very visible, but then there are aspects that are less visible, right? Including how it was built. Then there's Sustainable Development Goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, and the effort that was done to really involve local organizations and to train local workers and to create opportunity even in the neighborhood as we build. So really, I just feel like those are, and it's really neat to see how our own practices around construction and design are much more intentional about how those spaces become sources of learning in themselves. That's really neat. I can't wait to see our next project together, Juan. Be a lot of fun. So now, of course, you know, just to organize this conversation, speaking of silos, if you will, we had sort of a student. We have a faculty who creates experiential service learning opportunities. We had a head of our research enterprise, and of course a leader of our physical infrastructure, if you will. But in practice, I think what's become clear in this conversation, and all of these boxes show up as 4 clear boxes on my screen here are totally interrelated. That many of the projects that Jenny engages in have a clear research component, that the research that happens in those institutes actually creates enormous learning opportunities for our students, how our students experience. So all these things are really interrelated. So I would like to maybe expand on that a little bit and ask, maybe I'll ask you, Jenny, to start, but what should be sort of in an ideal world, that combination of research and learning experiences to have the maximum impact that we can on our students?
What should the combination be?
Yeah, or why should we think about these things in combination of research and learning? Maybe some of the examples of the work that happens in SLS.
Sure. Well, you know, I think the biggest thing is that if we want to actually do education and research that advances sustainable development, they have to be combined and iterative, right? Or formative, meaning that we should constantly be changing the way that we educate and research based on what we find through partnerships with people outside, across the departments that we work in and the fields that we work in, but also in collaboration with the communities outside of the university, right? There is so much knowledge that exists outside of the university. So I can give a quick example. There was an RCE network that is in Bolivia that had examples of indigenous students who moved from the rural areas to the city, and then they went to their university. And what they found out was that these students' health really went down when they moved into the urban areas. They had given up their indigenous food pathways and kind of switched to eating the food that was processed that they found in the city. But in order to reintroduce these indigenous food pathways, they didn't just educate the students, they really learned what these students' life was like, and they changed their health curriculum within the university so that an understanding of indigenous food pathways was something that was now being taught in the university. So there's so much community knowledge that's out there that doesn't come in. And I think the more that we can figure out how we have education and research partners that inform each other with real world partners that are considered co-collaborators, not people, back to your point, Reid, not people we're serving, but people who are co-researchers and co-educators with us. I guess one other thing I'll say about that is that a best practice that we've started to implement ever since we started SLS is that we pay our community partners to be co-educators of our students and to be co-researchers, because oftentimes they're the only people sitting at the table who aren't getting paid. So we have a whole compensation guidelines for, and we need to have budgets that recognize that when these community partners come into our classes, they are educating our students and they need to be compensated as such. So that's, you know, figuring out how those structures can fit in partnerships with community members as educators and researchers is a key way of doing it. And I think we also have some great examples from a VIP that we're involved in, but maybe Juan wants to talk about that because Juan and I actually teach that together.
Well, in fact, that's kind of, to me, that's a perfect example, right, of how research and learning combine. So Juan, why don't you explain to people who may not have experienced a VIP course, why don't you explain what those courses are, and then maybe talk about the one you're personally involved with?
Sure. So VIP stands for Vertically Integrated Project. And to me, that just means that these projects are led by students that are in different grade levels. So vertically, so you have all the way from first year to graduate students that work together on a project. And as this course goes through the years, students come in and out of the project, but you have a consistent project that goes through, with some students going from being 1 or 2, 3 years in and then teach them as they go along. And with Jenny, we're involved in the VIP for that is called VIP for Equity and Sustainability in the Built Environment, or something along those lines. I like to butcher the exact title, but anyway, you can see what that's about. And I got involved just because of my initial involvement with Candida. So this course is taught in the Candida building, and it really is leading by example. We use that building as a laboratory for some of these projects and a springboard. And I was brought to the table because I showed a lot of interest in the building and its potential and what it could do. And as a former student at Georgia Tech, again, being an architecture major back in the day, I remembered that when I worked on projects at Georgia Tech, I was always thinking of that human side of what I was doing. I wasn't satisfied with just doing a pretty picture here. I always was asking, who's the client, who is the end user, and not the client as in the person paying for this project, but who's actually using it. And so a lot of what we're doing in our VIP is asking ourselves that question: who are we building for? And not necessarily just buildings, but infrastructural projects too.
Very good. Well, before let me to make sure we have ample time for questions, because I have a whole bunch of questions for you guys, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. Our colleague Drew Cutright, I think, has been scanning, and if at any time, Drew, you just feel free to jump in with any questions that are being posed. I see you now.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I don't believe we have a lot of great information in the chat, a lot of links to check out. I did not see any questions yet, but I would love to invite folks, if they have questions, to go ahead and come off mute, put your camera on. It's not a huge group, so we can have a great conversation.
Well, just encourage everybody to participate. Meanwhile, I have questions, and probably this next one is for maybe Julia and maybe Jenny. But I mean, Jenny was tongue in cheek talking about sort of this the anthropologists that live among us, even if we don't know. Well, listen, as a graduate of the School of Psychology at Georgia Tech, I've spent all my life telling people that yes, we have psychology at Georgia Tech. It's actually a pretty darn good program. So I hear you. But maybe, Julie, as you think about these interdisciplinary institutes and research in general, right? The people immediately sort of think that research is sort of technical or scientific in general. Why do we need, what is the role for social scientists, for the humanities? And maybe there might be some examples, even the work we're doing, whether it's on cybersecurity or AI or.
Right. Well, if we plan the research without taking into account the people in the world around us, we will get research that's not equitably distributed in terms of the benefits. So I think it's very important that we be partnering right from the beginnings of research projects with social scientists and humanists who can help us plan for what we want out of our research. One example I can think of that is ongoing at Georgia Tech is a program to bring robots into the home for healthcare. And here the idea is to enable people to have better health and well-being, reduce inequality, and have more sustainable communities. These are all 3 out of the 17 SDGs. And in this particular project, individuals who have reduced mobility or are aging are able to stay more independent if we can learn to create robots that can participate in their care. And I'm not talking about necessarily companion robots, although that is a thing too, but I'm thinking about some of the very basic needs that many of us don't think about every day, that we don't feel the need to worry about yet. But it can happen to anybody. And so there's development to create robots that can help people dress themselves so that they can be more independent in their homes when they have reduced ability to do that task, that can help them feed themselves if they have a disability that prevents that. And these are projects that are ongoing at Georgia Tech and that integrate across the social sciences, engineering, computer sciences, in order to get not just the technology out there, but to design the technology in a way that is of benefit to the people who really need it. In the particular case I'm thinking of with this robots for home health care, the robots that are designed at Georgia Tech by Charlie Kemp They were designed in collaboration with a disabled man who had certain needs, and he helped inform the design of those technologies. So really a close addressing of what the social needs are that could be met with technology.
What's your pitch, Jenny, when people ask you, what does an anthropologist like you do in a place like this?
Well, part of me thinks about.
Why is it important? Why is it important?
To me, it's important for all the reasons Julia said and more. And the more part of it to me is that I don't even think we are even at the edge of understanding what innovation looks like. I think if we do not involve people from the humanities especially, we can't even think about what makes human beings tick. And I think, we can give people as much information as we want to give them, but generally people don't change their minds because they learn more information. They change their minds because they have a worldview and we have figured out how to work with them on that worldview. I think figuring out what it is that's going to help, for example, diversify the fields of economics and design and engineering and all that stuff. It takes a lot more than just introducing, say, engineering into a community. So how do you help people realize and come together and come up with solutions that are completely different than anything they have ever thought of? And I think if we don't have not just the social science behavioral research, but if we don't develop better ways of understanding how to really work together and understand each other, and we don't develop different ways of understanding what it means for human beings to be connected to each other and to feel a part of the natural world, we will never get to those innovations. So to me, those are the really deep areas. And you see this, I think, through things like study abroad. You go to different countries, and what some of our students they go on sustainable development, or they learn about sustainability in Japan and Spain, and they come back and they really understand that a lot of sustainability has to do with ways about understanding our relationship to the rest of the world and each other more than it. And until we understand that, we don't even know what technologies we need. So that would be my pitch.
Very good, very good. So Reid, I suppose that in addition to enjoying your learning in international affairs and in sustainability and the sustainable development goals, you probably want a job after you get out of Georgia Tech. I'm going to make that guess. And
that's correct.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, which is, what would be your ideal career, and what do you think this could prepare you for? By the way, in case you wonder, the person next to you on my screen, which is Juan, he has found a way, right, to have a career in a space where he's making a difference in sustainability, and actually probably the others as well. But what would be an ideal career path for you?
That's a great question, and that's something I've pondered coming to Tech as a social science student and wanting to get involved in engineering and global development projects. So for me, it's a career in data analytics and global development projects, and having that societal and cultural education background that Dr. Hirsch from SLS was really getting to. And instead of like engineering projects and being part of the project management, which I love and I really want to be a part of, I also want to do data analytics on the efficacy of projects. How efficient are these projects? What can we learn? And so, for example, we do a global dev day that'll actually be this week for our members on organizations, and it's lessons learned on previous Engineering Without Borders projects, and how can we as a community, whether it's technical, whether it's finance, come together and understand some of these issues and problems that we have. And so this either looks like working for an NGO that specializes in sustainable development initiatives. I've applied for places like the USAID and EPA as well. And I'm also a sustainable cities minor. So we'll see how it occurs with the SLS internship for the summer. I'm also waiting on hearing from that as well. And I also speak Spanish as well, so it's a process for me. Obviously not fluent, but it's something that I want to incorporate in my curriculum and do development work specifically in Latin America.
That's great. And Reid, puedes practicar español con Juan o conmigo cuando quieras.
Okay. Muchas gracias.
Juan, actually, when we built Candida, I mean, clearly we deal with all, not just NGOs, we deal with businesses that do well, right? The businesses that do the engineering work and the construction. I mean, these are professionals, these are careers, these are businesses that are doing very well by actually making a big contribution to a more sustainable world, right? So what would be your advice for students who may believe now that they have to choose between getting a good job or actually deepening their understanding of sustainability?
Oh, yeah, you absolutely don't have to make a choice. I recently did a strengths finder exercise and I found that my #1 strength is learner. I love to learn, and I did not know at your age, Reid, that I was going to work at Georgia Tech. In fact, I wanted to get as far away from Georgia Tech as possible. No, not really. But what I definitely wanted to do was to learn more and more about being an architect and what it really meant. And I already knew when I first came into tech that I loved to draw. That was the baseline. So what do I do with this drawing skill that I have? But I just kept learning more about what architecture meant to just greater society, and then to just the local community, and how I worked with clients would influence their lives in the end. And yeah, to me, it was pretty accidental. So what I would say is that you don't have to have it all figured out, but just follow your instinct as to what you like to do in that moment and maybe where it would lead you in the next few years. But just keep your mind open to opportunities. Get all the certifications and registrations that you can get, those open doors you don't know exist yet. I became a registered architect as early as I could. And that really did lead me to where I am today, not knowing that, of course. So just keep an open mind.
Terrific. All right. Well, I'm going to ask each of you in closing is to have maybe your very short pitch for why you think you encourage students to use this week, Sustainable Development Goals Week, to learn more about SDGs. Just one reason why you think everybody should use this as an opportunity to learn more about the goals, what they are, what they can do about them.
Okay.
Julia.
Okay. I would challenge students to pick a goal that seems far from what they think their main domain is, and find a connection point, because I think that if all of us dig at these 17 goals and even go to the one that looks to be the most alien to them in terms of how that connects to what they're learning or doing as a student at Georgia Tech, you can find a connecting point. And maybe it'll be through other people, but I think that could really bring you opportunities down the road in order to expand our view of what the SDGs are.
Terrific advice. Thank you. Who's next?
I can go next.
Go ahead.
I would really encourage people to continue learning today and come to an event that we're doing at Scheller College of Business in a couple hours that's all about community-based approaches to the SDGs with a community partner, and you're going to teach some asset-based community development. And I would challenge everybody to really think about what does it mean to really advance the SDGs at the very hyper-local level of a community in partnership with the university. And then you might find your way in your own backyard.
Terrific. Thank you. So yeah, that nice plug. Don't miss that event. Juan, you're next.
And I would say that
closing word.
On top of those two, don't be afraid to, once you find out more about what you want to find out about, reach out to someone at Georgia Tech or anywhere else just to ask them questions about it. Interview them, take them out to lunch or coffee. Make a connection with the person that's in that field where you want to make a difference. And again, that will open up doors.
Gracias, Juan. Reid, you have the closing word. What's your plug?
Great. And I think I just want to go back to infrastructure in terms of explore a part of campus that you've never been before. If you haven't gotten a chance to explore the Eco Commons or Candida, or have no idea what a LEED certified building is, go and talk to someone or find out or try the slide at the Eco Commons or explore the certain areas around that. And I know that there's some events actually for SDG Week, maybe on Friday with Association for Sustainable Investment. I think they're talking through a podcast at some point outside on the patio in Candida. So lots of opportunities, take advantage of them. Don't be afraid if it's maybe an SDG, like Dr. Kubanek was talking about, that you're not as familiar with.
Terrific. And I think Drew just posted some information. Also, there's an information-rich exchange on the chat, which you can all download. Let me close here so that we stay on time, but by thanking first of all, our panelists for this great conversation, much appreciated. But also, I hope it illustrates how every single person can make a difference in achieving these super important goals. And whether you are an architect or a biologist or an anthropologist or an international affairs person, interestingly, none of the four panelists are engineers, which is kind of a traditional strength of Georgia Tech. And each one of them is an active member and a leader in our community and making a difference. So I think that this illustrates, I think, that the very important message that everybody has a role to play. So with that, I want to thank all of you for participating, and let's keep the learning going. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.